Live from Marib, this is the news bulletin from SABA satellite channel. Here are tonight's top stories. PLC member Al-Muharrami discusses with U.S. Charge Day affairs, Houthi threats and maritime security. Prime Minister inspects Transport Ministry, orders high readiness amid Houthi escalation. Military media reports Houthi launch of 2 plastic missiles toward Mocha and Red Sea. Welcome back. Presidential Leadership Council member Abdul Rahman Al-Muharrami has discussed recent developments in Yemen and the region with U.S. Charge Day Affairs Nail Hub, including the Houthi threat to regional security and international maritime navigation. The meeting addressed political, security, and military developments, as well as continued Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea and their impact of international shipping and global trade routes. Al-Muharrami stressed the importance of continued U.S. and international support for Yemen's legitimate government, including pressure on the Houthis to halt their attacks and efforts to disrupt their sources of financing and arms supplies. The talks also focus on strengthening Yemen-U.S. cooperation in counterterrorism, combating smuggling, protecting maritime routes, and building the capacity of national security institutions. Al-Muharrami highlighted government efforts to strengthen state institutions, address economic and humanitarian challenges, and improve security capabilities. The U.S. Charge Day Affairs reaffirmed Washington's commitment to cooperation with the Yemeni government, supporting stability, counterterrorism efforts, and initiatives aimed at achieving peace and ending the suffering of the Yemeni people. Presidential Leadership Council member and Hadramaut Governor Salam Al-Khanbashi has praised Kuwait's humanitarian and development support for Yemen, particularly initiatives aimed at improving living conditions for vulnerable families. During a meeting in Mukalla with representatives of the Abdullah Hubayshan Foundation for Development and Charitable Work, Al-Khanbashi reviewed preparations for a housing complex project in Al-Shahr district, funded through Kuwait support. The project is expected to provide between 100 and 150 housing units for low-income and vulnerable families, along with service and community facilities designed to meet residents' basic needs and provide a stable living environment. Al-Khanbashi stressed the project's importance in supporting humanitarian and development efforts and instructed the relevant authorities to facilitate the required procedures and address any obstacles to ensure work begins promptly and is completed according to the established standards. Prime Minister Dr. Shaya Al-Zindani has inspected the Ministry of Transport in Aden to review performance across the land, maritime and air transport sectors and assess preparations aimed renewed Houthi escalation. During a meeting with the ministry officials and affiliated authorities and companies, Al-Zindani reviewed the readiness of land crossings, ports and airports with a focus on maintaining the movement of passengers and goods and protecting vital infrastructure. The Prime Minister said Houthi attacks on ports, civilian facilities and commercial vessels, particularly the recent targeting of Mocha port, represent a serious threat to Yemen's economy and to international maritime trade. He instructed the ministry to strengthen coordination and readiness and adopt comprehensive emergency plans to ensure rapid response and minimize disruption to transport and trade. Al-Zindani also called for structural reforms across the transport sector, stressing the need to restore Aden Port's regional rule, improve institution performance, and strengthen cooperation with the private sector to develop infrastructure and services. Transport Minister Mohsen Al-Umari said the ministry had already implemented precautionary measures and raised readiness levels across its sectors in response to the latest developments. Aden Governor and State Minister Abdul Rahman Sheikh has discussed developments in Aden and continued Houthi terrorist militia attacks on international shipping routes with U.S. Charge Day Affairs Nail Hub. The meeting reviewed the security and economic repercussions of the attacks in the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandab and Gulf of Aden, and their implications for the safety of international navigation and commercial trade. The two sides also discussed efforts to strengthen security and stability in Aden, as well as security, humanitarian and public services issues affecting the temporary capital and its residents. Sheikh stressed the importance of continued coordination with the international community and support for efforts to consolidate security and stability in Aden while addressing the challenges arising from regional developments. Minister of Public Health and Population Dr. Qasim Buhaibeh has discussed with World Food Programme Country Director Al-Qadir Dalloum ways to strengthen cooperation and expand support for the health sector amid Yemen's ongoing humanitarian challenges. The meeting in Aden reviewed existing joint programs, implementation progress, and priority health and humanitarian needs with a focus on directing assistance toward the areas and communities facing the greatest needs. Buhaibeh has stressed the importance of integrating health, nutrition, and humanitarian interventions to maximize available resources and improve access to essential services. He praised the WFP's support for vulnerable communities and its contribution to food and nutrition security, particularly efforts that can reduce the health consequences of malnutrition among the children, women, and other vulnerable groups. The WFP country director reaffirmed the program's commitment to continued cooperation with Yemen's health ministry and stressed the importance of joint planning and data sharing to better target assistance. Yemen's ambassador to Japan, Aden al-Sunaini, has discussed strengthened bilateral relations and maritime security with Japanese State Minister of Defense Masahisa Miyazaki. The talks focus on developments in Yemen and growing threats to navigation in the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and Bab el-Mandab Strait amid continued Houthi escalation. Al-Sunaini warned that the attacks threaten global trade, supply chains, and energy security, stressing the importance of international coordination to protect vital maritime routes. He also praised Japan's support for Yemen's legitimate government, unity, security, stability, and territorial integrity, as well as its backing for peace efforts. Japanese minister reaffirmed Tokyo's support for Yemen's unity, security, and stability, pledging continued assistance to the Yemeni government and people while supporting maritime security, freedom of navigation, and peace efforts. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk has warned that Houthi attacks on civilian infrastructure are deepening the suffering of Yemen's population, as at least 18 million Yemenis face food insecurity, according to the United Nations. Turk called on all parties to comply with international humanitarian and human rights law and refrain from targeting civilians and civilian objectives. He also urged all sides to take every possible precaution to prevent civilian deaths and injuries and avoid damage to civilian infrastructure. The United Nations Rights Chief called for de-escalation and warned against actions that could push Yemen back into full-scale conflict. According to Turk, 17 civilians have been killed in Houthi attacks on areas under government control since August 6. The United Nations said recent attacks have hit the Jawad Nasim displacement camp in Marib, injuring 6 civilians, including a child, as well as Mocha Burton Taiz and a commercial vessel in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. The warning comes as Yemen continues to face the combined effects of years of conflict, displacement, and the severe humanitarian crisis. For several days, Yemen has witnessed a sharp escalation in military activity. But beyond the front lines, another battle is being fought in cities and communities. A battle over the safety of civilians. More in the following report.
The Houthi militia's latest escalation has once again brought the threat of war directly to civilian neighborhoods. In Marib, the Houthi militia has launched repeated missile and drone attacks against the city. On Saturday, local authorities reported that 6 ballistic missiles and 4 drones targeted residential areas, causing casualties and damage to homes, vehicles, and private property. These attacks came after a series of strikes that have repeatedly placed civilians and displacement camps in Marib in the line of fire. For families who have already been displaced by war, the message is painfully familiar. Even areas far from front line can suddenly become targets. On the western coast, the picture is equally alarming. Mocha has come under repeated Houthi missile and drone attacks. Official sources reported more than 90 missiles and drones have been fired towards the port over several days, forcing the suspension of commercial and maritime activity and causing 7 deaths and an estimated $79 million in damage. An earlier attack on August 9 was reported to have killed 3 civilians and 4 military personnel and wounded 30 people. The Houthi militia claimed it was targeting Saudi military concentrations and weapon depots, while the attacks struck civilian areas and infrastructure. On August 11, the Yemeni commercial vessel Tihama was attacked in Bab al-Mandab, killing 4 sailors, 3 Pakistanis and 1 Indonesian. On the other side of the battlefield, the government forces have continued military operations against Houthi positions across several fronts. According to statements from their armed forces, recent strikes have focused on military positions, weapon depots, firing points, and other sources of threats. The armed forces have repeatedly stated that their operations are conducted under rules of engagement and with measures intended to protect civilians and civilian facilities. That distinction is central. The battlefield should remain a battlefield, not a place where civilians, homes, schools, hospitals, ports, or displacement camps become instruments of war. But the government response is not military alone. President Rashad al-Alimi has repeatedly emphasized that Yemen's objective is not another temporary truce, but a lasting and sustainable peace based on functioning state, one national authority, and the state's exclusive control over weapons. The government is also seeking stronger international diplomatic backing, arguing that repeated containment of Houthi attacks has failed to produce lasting stability. For ordinary Yemenis, however, the political arguments are ultimately measured in very simple terms: a home that remains standing, a school that remains open, a hospital that can function, a port that can receive food and essential goods, and a city where families can sleep without fearing the next missile or drone. The government message is that restoring the state means protecting those lives and institutions, and that military force must serve the objective rather than replace it. The Houthi militia's continued attacks on populated areas and civilian infrastructure, by contrast, demonstrate the danger of bringing military confrontation into civilian spaces. And as the escalation continues, the question facing Yemen and the international community is increasingly clear. Will Yemen's future be decided by a state seeking to restore security and institutions, or by a militia willing to put civilian lives and the country's vital infrastructure at risk in pursuit of a wider regional agenda?
Military media reported that Houthi forces launched 2 ballistic missiles from positions east of Taiz city toward Mocha and the Red Sea in a new escalation threatening coastal areas and maritime navigation near the Bab al-Mandab Strait. The Taiz military access media center said surveillance teams detected the launches from a position behind the Beit Hayal Said An'am factories, specifically the former headquarters of the 170th Air Defense Brigade on Mount Oman in Al-Hawban. The 2 missiles were reportedly directed toward Mocha and the Red Sea. Military and media sources said the Houthis have launched a total of 5 ballistic missiles toward the Bab al-Mandab since this morning, from positions of the Ib and Al-Hawban east of Taiz. The latest escalation comes amid continued Houthi attacks across Marib, Taiz, Yemen, and eastern of the coast, and Mocha port using ballistic missiles and drones. That was the news bulletin from SABA satellite channel from Marib. Thank you for watching and have a good time.